People don't just vanish. They leave a trail, a footprint in the mud, a dropped lighter, a scent of fear. But in the Appalachian mountains, the rules are different. The forest doesn't just swallow you, it digests your existence. My name is Arthur Vance, private investigator. Usually I deal with cheating spouses, embezzlement, and the ugly side of city life. The kind of dirt you can wash off with cheap whiskey in a hot shower. But 2 weeks ago, a wealthy family from Boston handed me a check with too many zeros. Their son, Elias, a 22-year-old photography student, went hiking in the Blackwood Ridge. He never came back. When I drove into the local town of Oakhaven, it felt like a place that had died 20 years ago, but forgot to stop breathing. The locals didn't look at me. They looked through me. The local rangers told me to drop it. The sheriff, an old man with hollow, tired eyes, leaned over his desk, reeking of stale coffee and stale regrets. "Some places don't like to be walked on, Mr. Vance," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The boy belongs to the ridge now. Leave it alone." I should have listened, but the check cleared, and I've never been good at taking advice. I drove up to the trailhead at dusk. The rain started coming down in sheets, washing the color out of the world until everything was just black, white, and gray. I lit a cigarette, the sudden flare of the Zippo reflecting in the wet windshield. The sky bled out, turning from a bruised purple to absolute pitch black. The moment I stepped past the tree line, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The air tasted metallic, like old pennies and wet earth. I clicked on my heavy-duty flashlight. The beam cut through the thick, rolling fog, but the shadows seemed to push back. In a normal forest, you hear life: crickets, owls, the wind rustling the leaves. But here, dead silence. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. The kind that feels like someone is holding their breath, waiting for you to move. My heavy boots crunched against the dead pine needles, and every step sounded like a gunshot in the dark. I found his campsite 3 miles in. It was completely dark. The yellow nylon of his tent wasn't just torn, it was shredded from the inside out. Long, desperate slashes. But there was no blood. No signs of a bear or a mountain lion. Just his backpack, a cold fire pit, and a portable cassette recorder half buried in the mud. I wiped the dirt off the plastic and pressed play. First, there was just the hiss of the tape. Then, Elias's voice. He sounded out of breath, panicked, whispering as if whatever he was hiding from was standing right outside. "It's outside the tent," the recording cracked. "It's been walking in circles for an hour. It's walking on 2 legs, but the footsteps are too heavy. It's too tall." There was a long pause on the tape, just the sound of heavy rain, and then another voice, a woman's voice. "Elias, honey, open up. It's Mom. I'm so cold out here." I froze. My blood turned to ice. Elias's mother was in a wheelchair, back in a sterile bedroom in Boston. She hadn't walked in 10 years. But the voice on the tape, it was a perfect copy of hers. Except for one thing. The cadence was entirely wrong. It didn't sound human. It sounded like an old radio trying to remember what a human sounded like. A perfect reproduction, devoid of a soul. I clicked the tape off. The silence of the woods crashed back over me, heavier and more suffocating than before. My hand instinctively went to the snub-nosed point .38 revolver in my heavy trench coat pocket. The cold steel usually brought me comfort. Tonight, it felt like a useless toy against whatever was out here. I slowly turned around, shining the beam into the trees. Nothing.
just towering trunks of black pine that looked like iron bars trapping me inside an endless cage. I took a step back toward the trail.
And that's when I heard it. About 50 feet to my left, hidden entirely in the black ink of the woods. I should have listened, but the check cleared. It was my own voice, whispering back to me from the darkness, word for word, exact intonation, exact gravelly pitch. It had been listening to me since I got out of the car. It was learning me. I didn't run. Running triggers the predator instinct. I backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight aimed at the origin of the sound. But as I moved, the geography of the forest seemed to warp. The trees shifted. The trail I had followed just an hour ago was gone, replaced by a dense wall of briars and twisted roots. Then, the fog parted just enough for my flashlight to catch something impossible. Standing in the middle of a small clearing surrounded by decaying trees was a perfect, pristine wooden staircase. It wasn't attached to a house. It wasn't the ruins of an old cabin. It was just a staircase, covered in clean, red carpet, leading up into the empty air. And sitting on the top step was a yellow raincoat. Elias's raincoat. "Are you lost, Mr. Vance?" The voice came from behind me this time. It wasn't my voice anymore. It was a chaotic blend of the sheriff's tired drawl, Elias's panicked whisper, and the mother's mechanical pleading. It was speaking in chords. I whipped around, pulling the .38 and firing a warning shot into the dark. The muzzle flash illuminated the woods for a fraction of a second in blinding, stark white. In that single frame of light, I saw it. It was impossibly tall, its limbs stretched and bent with too many joints. Its skin was the color of dirty snow, pulled tight over a skeletal frame. But it didn't have a face. Where its features should have been, there was only a smooth, pale surface reflecting the light like a blank canvas waiting to be painted. And it was wearing my fedora, the one I had left in the car. The darkness snapped back. I didn't fire again. I ran. I tore through the underbrush, the branches whipping my face, tearing at my coat. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I just kept the compass in my mind, pointed south, toward the highway. Behind me, the heavy, unnatural footsteps kept pace. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't running. It was striding. "Leave it alone, Mr. Vance," the thing called out, mimicking the sheriff perfectly, but laughing between the words. A wet, tearing sound of a laugh. "The boy belongs to the ridge now." I burst through the tree line just as the first cold gray light of dawn began to bleed into the sky. My boots hit the wet asphalt of Route 66. I collapsed against the hood of my car, gasping for air, my lungs burning, the rain washing the mud and blood from my face. I looked back at the forest. The impenetrable wall of black pines stood perfectly still in the morning mist. The presence was gone. The overwhelming, crushing dread had vanished with the sunrise. They don't cross the tree line. The sheriff knew that. The rangers knew that. I threw my gear into the trunk, got in, and slammed the door. I locked it, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I didn't look in the rearview mirror until I was 10 miles down the highway. 2 days later, I was back in my office in the city. The neon sign outside my window flickered, casting long, familiar shadows across my desk. I drank a glass of cheap bourbon, staring at the check from the Boston family. I never cashed it. I told them Elias was dead, a tragic hiking accident. I lied to them because the truth was a contagion I refused to spread. I was safe. The city was concrete, glass, and steel, the exact opposite of the Blackwood Ridge. It was midnight when the old rotary phone on my desk rang. The shrill sound cut through the quiet of my office. I picked up the receiver. Vance. For a moment, there was just the hiss of static, like an old portable cassette recorder. Then, a voice spoke through the receiver. People don't just vanish, they leave a trail. It was my voice, but beneath the static, I could hear the faint, unmistakable sound of the wind howling through the black pine trees. I slowly lowered the phone, looking at the dark corner of my office. The shadows there seemed just a little too deep, a little too quiet. I didn't leave the forest. It followed me home.